"Stop smiling at him," Dante Moretti warned, and the treaty ballroom fell silent. His alluring secretary, Evelyn Shaw, stood beside a rival envoy with her hand resting on a sealed route folder. Every captain had already seen the security photograph Evelyn entering the envoy's hotel room at midnight. Now she appeared to be flirting while Dante's convoy plans sat inches from the man's fingers. Evelyn kept smiling. Then she tapped 3 times on the folder's brass clasp, the emergency code she had built into Dante's meeting protocol. "He never asked about the treaty," she said. "He asked which elevator you use after midnight." The envoy's smile vanished. Dante opened the folder and found blank paper dusted with fresh fingerprint powder. Evelyn had baited the leak, and the only prints belonged to someone inside Dante's own council. The ballroom doors locked. The envoy crushed a transmitter beneath his heel. Its countdown showed 6 minutes before Dante's real route reached the assassin waiting below. Dante moved before anyone else recovered. He seized the envoy's wrist and drove it against the marble table, while 2 security men stripped away the transmitter. "Freeze the north elevator. Seal the underground garage," he commanded. Evelyn's gaze snapped toward the western doors. "Don't send your men through that corridor." One captain stopped with his hand against the latch. "Why?" Dante demanded. Evelyn pulled the evening staffing chart from beneath her ledger. 3 temporary catering workers had been reassigned to the western corridor less than an hour earlier. The approval carried her electronic signature. "Because I never authorized this change." The transmitter chimed. 5 minutes and 12 seconds remained. Dante released the envoy into his men's custody and crossed to Evelyn. At 44, he had survived ambushes by treating hesitation as a wound. Yet the woman before him had managed every private meeting, emergency route, and coded appointment of his legitimate shipping empire for 7 years. If her access had been compromised, nothing surrounding him was trustworthy. If she had betrayed him, no one had ever stood closer to his throat. Evelyn turned the transmitter over with a linen napkin. A thin green line pulsed across its screen. "It isn't storing your route," she said. "It's waiting to receive it from the master calendar." Dante's operations captain checked his tablet. His face tightened. The request came through Miss Shaw's credentials. Several men reached beneath their jackets. Evelyn did not step back. "My password couldn't authorize a live route. It also requires my physical key." She raised her left wrist. The silver keyband was still locked around it. Dante's eyes dropped to the clasp. No cut marks. No broken seal. Then the ballroom screen changed without warning. The security photograph filled it from floor to ceiling, Evelyn entering the rival envoy's suite at 12:07 that morning, carrying the same route folder against her chest. A second image showed her leaving 16 minutes later without it. "The photograph is genuine," Evelyn said before Dante could ask. "I went into his room." The admission stirred the room more violently than a denial would have. Dante's voice became quiet. "You entered an enemy's suite with my route plans and told no one. They were false plans. I needed him to believe I was willing to trade them. You needed me to believe you were loyal." Pain flashed across her face, but her hands remained steady. "Your private warning list was the leak." "Dante, if I had reported my suspicion through normal channels, whoever altered the calendar would have known immediately." 4 minutes remained. Evelyn pointed to the transmitter. "Change 1 digit in the convoy departure time. Do it from a device that has never touched your office network." Dante removed the clean emergency phone kept inside the treaty table and entered a false departure 2 minutes later than scheduled. The transmitter refreshed instantly. The same false time appeared on its screen. Every head turned slowly toward the people trapped inside the ballroom. Evelyn had proved the signal was being fed from this room. "Cut the ballroom relay," she said. "Not the building network. If you kill everything, the traitor will know we found the source." Dante gave the order. A security officer pulled the isolated relay from beneath the treaty table. The green line vanished, and the countdown froze at 2 minutes and 31 seconds. For one breath, no one moved. Then Dante's private phone vibrated inside his coat. A message had been sent from Evelyn's encrypted account 3 minutes earlier. He took the bait. "North elevator at 11:20. Make certain he enters alone." Dante held the screen where she could see it. Evelyn went pale. "I didn't send that. Your account, your root folder, your signature, your meeting with him. All true things placed in the wrong order." She looked past Dante toward the council members pressed against the locked doors. "That is how this person survives. Listen to me carefully. Whatever happens next, do not sign the emergency succession order." The north elevator chimed outside the ballroom despite Dante's command to freeze it. Evelyn spun toward the sound. The assassin isn't waiting in the garage. The doors began to open from the other side. Dante pulled Evelyn behind him, then signaled his men to surround her, as well as the entrance. "Confine her in the archive chamber until I know whose orders she is following." Hurt crossed her face, sharper than fear, as the security men dragged her away. She fought only long enough to shout one final warning. "The killer came upstairs with your own delegation." The ballroom doors closed between them just as the first shot struck the marble wall beside Dante's head. 6 days earlier, Evelyn had known the treaty was in danger because a breakfast tray arrived 7 minutes early. No one else in the Moretti headquarters noticed. Dante entered his private conference room at 7 sharp. "I found hot coffee waiting beside 12 shipping reports," and assumed the morning had obeyed him. Evelyn stood at the end of the walnut table, dressed in a deep blue suit that followed her generous curves without apology. Checking the brass clock against her paper ledger, the kitchen changed its delivery rotation. She said. Dante removed his coat. "Is that a crisis?" "Not yet." She lifted the folded service slip. The time had been altered in blue ink, but the initials beside it belonged to an employee who always used black. "Someone is testing whether small schedule changes reach your floor without verification." Dante studied her face. "Then the tray. Throw it away. I already had it tested, and the coffee is safe. The change is the problem." That was the rhythm of their 7 years together. Dante saw the threat when it raised a weapon. Evelyn saw it while it was still correcting a time on a kitchen form. He never asked how many disasters had died as minor clerical problems on her desk. She never told him. Stefano Rinaldi entered without knocking. Silver at his temples and affection arranged across his face like a tailored suit. He had served Dante's father, saved Dante from an alley ambush at 19, and spent the next 25 years being treated as the one man whose loyalty required no test. "Our secretary is interrogating breakfast again," Stefano said. Evelyn slid the altered slip into a clear evidence sleeve. "Breakfast has poor alibis." Dante's mouth nearly curved. Nearly. Stefano noticed. He always noticed the smallest movement between them. He set a red leather folder on the table. Emergency continuity papers. Standard protection before the Valenti Treaty. "If anything delays you tonight, temporary authority passes to me until the council can vote." Evelyn opened the folder before Dante touched it. The first page carried the Moretti corporate seal and the signatures of 2 attorneys. The final page was blank, except for a line awaiting Dante's name. Her fingertip paused over the embossed crest. One wing of the lion seemed shallower than the other. This seal was made on the old copper press, she said. Stefano shrugged. Your father's lawyers prefer tradition. That press was retired 9 years ago. Retired is not destroyed. Dante took the folder, glanced through the clauses, and handed it back to Evelyn. Review it. If it is standard, put it in tonight's signing packet. Stefano's eyes stayed on her. It has already been reviewed by counsel. Then my review will be quick, she replied. After he left, Dante poured himself coffee from the tested pot. You dislike him. I distrust documents that arrive pre-approved. Stefano kept me alive when half this city wanted my name carved into stone. That makes him brave. It does not make his paperwork correct. Dante's gaze hardened. Not with anger, but with an old defense, she recognized. He believed loyalty was measured by the worst night a man had survived beside him. Evelyn believed it was measured in quiet choices made when no one expected a reward. Her father had once kept the Moretti books. 15 years earlier, a shipment route had leaked. 3 drivers had died, and Samuel Shaw had been blamed because his initials appeared on the final manifest. He had denied it until his last breath. The Morettis had allowed the accusation to become his entire name. Evelyn had entered Dante's office 8 years later, intending to stay only long enough to understand how a true action could be made to tell a false story. She had remained because Dante was not his father, though some days he inherited the same blindness. At 10:30, she attended the treaty preparation meeting and recorded every promise in a narrow-lined book no network could alter. The agreement with the Valenti family would end a 2-year conflict over East Bridge Harbor and place both sides' legitimate shipping operations under an independent federal audit. 4,000 dock workers depended on the port remaining open. If the treaty was not signed before midnight on Friday, a court-appointed trustee would freeze both companies' berths, and the Salvi syndicate would acquire the abandoned leases through a shell bidder. The meeting could not simply be cancelled. Delay was the enemy's victory. During the discussion, Stefano suggested moving Dante's departure from the east garage to the north elevator. Evelyn wrote the suggestion in her book. The north elevator is not rated for the armored car platform, she said. Stefano gave her a patient smile. Then perhaps we should let security manage security. Dante looked at the route diagram. Keep the east garage. Evelyn recorded the decision and marked it with a small square, her symbol for an instruction that had been challenged. When the room emptied, Dante remained beside the window. You made Stefano look careless. I made the elevator look narrow. There is a difference. Only if he cares more about being respected than keeping you alive. Dante turned. For a second, the force of his attention made the space between them feel smaller. You enjoy provoking powerful men. No, I enjoy accurate minutes. His eyes dropped to the line of her mouth, then returned to the harbor below. Be careful which one you smile at. Evelyn felt the warning land, somewhere it should not have reached. I smile when people underestimate me. Then you must be exhausted. He left before she could answer, relying on her to follow with the red folder, his corrected schedule, and every danger he had not seen. The first clear anomaly appeared that afternoon. Evelyn compared the digital calendar with her handwritten ledger and found the north elevator restored as Dante's departure route. The system claimed she had approved the change at 12:07. At that exact minute she had been in the federal port office, signing the treaty witness list in front of 3 cameras. She tested the innocent explanation first. A synchronization delay could display the wrong time. So she created a harmless appointment labeled Bluebird and moved it between 2 conference rooms. Her paper ledger showed each step. The system recorded all 3 changes instantly. There was no delay. Someone had entered her account. She called the internal technology desk from an unlisted line and asked whether her credentials had been reset. The technician answered no, then grew quiet. A second authorization had been added to her profile under emergency continuity rules. The request came from Stefano's office. Before the technician could give her the device number, the call disconnected. His extension went out of service. Evelyn walked to his floor and found his desk empty. His family photograph gone, and a wet ring where a coffee cup had stood minutes earlier. Security said he had resigned by email. The email was time-stamped 4 minutes after the extension died. Evelyn returned to her office without using the elevator. A direct warning to Dante would pass through the private threat list shared by 5 council members, including Stefano, if Stefano was innocent. Accusing him would fracture the treaty on the word of a secretary already tied to a disgraced father. If he was guilty, he would erase the remaining trail and change the assassination plan. She needed to know whether the stolen access was being used to watch Dante or to guide someone toward him. She prepared 3 false route folders. Each contained a different elevator, departure time, and vehicle code. She dusted the brass clasps with transparent fingerprint powder, sealed them, and recorded their differences in her narrow-lined book. One went into the treaty safe. One went to the internal security office. The third she carried to Viktor Saranov, the rival envoy, whose family sold information to every side and loyalty to none. Viktor occupied a suite at the Hotel Aurelia beneath 6 cameras he believed he controlled. Evelyn entered at 12:07 the next day, knowing the image would become either protection or a weapon. He opened the door in shirt sleeves and smiled when he saw the route folder. Dante Moretti sends his secretary. Now, Dante doesn't know I'm here. That is far more interesting. Evelyn placed the folder on his desk, but kept one hand on its clasp. Someone offered your people access to Moretti convoy routes. I want the message and the price. Viktor poured 2 drinks. She did not touch hers. You assume I would betray a customer. You betrayed the last one when the second payment was late. His expression sharpened. Evelyn smiled. Men like Viktor mistook warmth for invitation, and invitation for leverage. The longer he believed he was directing the encounter, the more he revealed. He admitted receiving a promise of exclusive access to Eastbridge Harbor if the Valenti Treaty failed. The offer came through an encrypted channel and included one detail. Only the Moretti Council knew Dante's proposed use of the North Elevator. Evelyn slid the false folder closer. Take this to your buyer. Tell him I want enough money to disappear. Viktor looked at her with new respect. And if he asks why Dante's devoted secretary has changed sides, tell him devotion is only valuable while it is returned. She hated the line because part of it felt true. Viktor reached for the folder. Evelyn let him touch the powdered clasp, then withdrew it. She needed his prints, not the plans in his possession. His hand closed around her wrist. You came alone. No, she said. I came without witnesses. That is different. She pressed the alarm on her keyband. Hotel security knocked within seconds, and Viktor released her with a laugh that did not reach his eyes. By the time she reached headquarters, the internal security folder had been opened. Its route was the East Service elevator at 11:40. At 4:15, the master calendar changed Dante's Friday departure to the East Service elevator at 11:40. The trap had identified the leak as someone with access to the security office. Evelyn sent a sealed note to Dante, requesting a private meeting with no council notification. 3 minutes later, Stefano appeared at her door holding the unopened envelope. "You seem troubled," he said. Evelyn looked at the wax seal. It was intact, but the edge of the paper carried the faint crescent indentation left by the old copper press. He had routed her warning through the same machine used to prepare the succession order. "Only busy," she replied. "Triati week." Stefano placed the envelope on her desk. "Dante has no room for private worries. If the matter concerns security, tell me. It concerns grammar." She opened a shipping report and waited until he left. That evening, she found the technician who had vanished from headquarters. He called from a payphone near Union Station, whispering that the secondary authorization device was hidden inside the ballroom relay. Before he could name who installed it, a train drowned out his voice. A struggle followed. Then the line went dead. Evelyn contacted Victor through the number he had given her and offered the third false route in exchange for proof of the buyer's identity. He agreed to attend the treaty and carry a receiving transmitter. Evelyn could expose the live leak in front of every council member, but only if the traitor believed she had truly turned. She went home after midnight and found her apartment door unlocked. Nothing valuable was missing. On her kitchen table lay a copy of her father's old manifest, the document that had destroyed Samuel Shaw's name. Across his initials, someone had written in fresh red ink, "Like father, like daughter." Evelyn folded the page and put it inside her narrow-lined book. Fear would have told her to run. Memory told her exactly what running would prove. The first shot in the ballroom missed Dante because he had turned toward Evelyn's voice. A man in a Valenti security coat stepped from the north elevator and fired twice more. Dante overturned the treaty table, pulled an injured delegate behind the marble base, and returned one measured shot that broke the gunman's shoulder. Moretti security closed around him before he could reach the service stairs. The attacker bit through a capsule hidden in his molar and collapsed without giving a name. In the archive chamber below, Evelyn heard the gunfire through the ventilation shaft. The two men escorting her received conflicting orders through their earpieces. One was told to remain. The other was ordered to bring her keyband upstairs. Both commands carried Dante's authorization code. "Ask him for the second phrase," Evelyn said. The younger guard hesitated. Moretti emergency instructions always required a spoken response. The older guard drew his weapon instead. Evelyn drove the spine of her ledger into his wrist. The gun discharged into a shelf, showering the room with paper. The younger man tackled him while Evelyn reached the wall alarm. But no signal left the chamber. Someone had isolated it before she arrived. Behind a rolling shelf, a red light blinked on an industrial scanner attached to the retired copper seal press. The machine Dante believed was stored in his father's legal archive had been operating beneath the ballroom. Beside it lay 3 freshly embossed succession orders and a stack of blank Moretti letterhead. Evelyn tore the top page free. The older guard threw off his partner and came at her with a knife. She trapped his arm between 2 steel shelves and kicked the floor lock. The shelves rolled together with a crash, pinning him long enough for her to pull the younger guard through the document hatch. She refused to abandon him simply because his uniform matched the man trying to kill her. They descended in a narrow service lift used to move records between floors. Halfway down, the cable jerked. A blade cut Evelyn's shoulder as the carriage slammed against the shaft. But she forced the gate open and climbed into a laundry corridor with the succession page inside her jacket. Upstairs, Dante faced evidence arriving faster than he could test it. Security found the missing technology specialist dead near Union Station with Evelyn's private number in his pocket. An audio file from Victor's suite captured Evelyn saying she wanted enough money to disappear. The final sentence had been removed, leaving no mention of the trap. Then, a search of her office uncovered a glass copy of Dante's convoy token inside her locked drawer. Stefano stood beside him without triumph, which made his grief more convincing. She learned from her father. He said quietly, "Samuel sold one route. His daughter nearly sold the entire harbor." Dante's restraint cracked. "Do not use her father to explain evidence we have not authenticated. The evidence has already explained itself." Stefano placed the red continuity folder on the table. "Sign temporary authority to me. Let me secure the port while you determine how deeply she compromised us." Dante remembered Evelyn's warning and pushed the folder away. No succession order. For the first time, Stefano's calm slipped. Only for a second. But Dante saw it. Before he could examine that reaction, a camera feed appeared from the lower service hall. Evelyn, bleeding through her blue jacket. Knelt beside Viktor Saranov. The rival envoy had been shot through the side. She removed the transmitter from his coat, helped him stand, and disappeared with him through a loading exit. To the council, it looked like an extraction. To Dante, it looked like the woman who knew every Moretti weakness, escaping beside the man who had purchased her betrayal. He called her once. Her phone rang on the ballroom table, exactly where someone had placed it. Dante's face became stone. Suspend all of Evelyn Shaw's access. Find her alive. Stefano leaned closer. Alive leaves her time to sell what remains. That was not a suggestion. The council watched Dante cross to the treaty platform. The Valentis demanded a public answer before they would remain in the building. Dante could not reveal the cloned relay, the internal prints, or the uncertain evidence without telling the traitor how much Evelyn had uncovered. So he made the cruelest statement that strategy allowed. Until this investigation is complete, Evelyn Shaw no longer speaks with my authority and no longer stands under Moretti protection. The declaration traveled through every family channel within minutes. Evelyn heard it from a radio in Victor's stolen delivery van. She pressed one hand against her wounded shoulder and kept driving while Victor fought to remain conscious beside her. "He chose them," she whispered. Victor's breathing came shallow and rough. "Then stop protecting him." Evelyn looked at the succession page hidden beneath her blood-stained jacket. "I'm not protecting Dante now. I'm protecting everyone who will die if Stefano signs his name." Behind them, black vehicles entered the avenue. Ahead, the harbor clock moved toward midnight. The treaty attack earned Dante a court extension of 72 hours. Not mercy. Federal port observers moved the final signing to Founders Hall at Eastbridge Harbor, where neither family controlled the building. If Dante and the Valenti leader failed to appear, the trustee would freeze the berths and accept the Salvi Syndicate's lease claim. Stefano used the deadline like a knife. He argued that Dante should sign the continuity order before entering another public venue. Dante refused and began working without the woman who had made his power appear effortless. Within 12 hours, 2 captains arrived for the same patrol. A federal attorney received the wrong draft, and an armored convoy blocked a hospital entrance because no one had checked the city permit. Evelyn had never merely kept Dante's calendar. She had prevented every division of his empire from colliding with the others. Her absence revealed the shape of her labor and the depth of his dependence. Near dawn, Dante locked himself in her office with her paper procedures. On the first page of the emergency route manual, Evelyn had written a rule in red: no principal travels alone. 2-person confirmation, even under direct command. Yet the message sent from her account instructed the assassin to make certain Dante entered alone. That was the first contradiction. Evelyn could have betrayed him. But she would not have written an order that violated the habit she enforced, even when he shouted at her. Dante pulled the hotel footage and the master calendar audit onto separate screens. Evelyn entered Victor's suite at 12:07. Her stolen profile also approved the north elevator at 12:07 from a terminal inside Moretti headquarters. The hotel was 18 minutes away under an emergency escort. That was the second contradiction. Someone had not stolen her password. Someone had duplicated her authorization and needed the photograph to make the impossible timestamp look like proof of cooperation. He reopened the audio file. The room tone shifted before Evelyn said she wanted money. A hotel ventilation hum disappeared for half a second. The recording had been cut. Dante ordered the original recovered from Victor's suite. Stefano entered before the command left the room. Victor's original recorder is missing, he said. Dante had not told him the audio came from a recorder. Only 4 people knew. One was Evelyn. One was the wounded Victor. One was the technician now dead. The 4th had created the edited file. That was the third contradiction. Dante kept his face empty. Then we proceed without it. Stefano relaxed. Dante handed him a sealed note. I will sign temporary authority at the glass house tomorrow at 9. No counsel. No witnesses beyond you and the notary. Relief warmed Stefano's eyes before he lowered them. A wise decision. The location was false. Dante gave 2 other suspected council members different signing sites and different hours. Then he sent a private search order through a retired Moretti driver who had never used the digital network. Find Evelyn before Stefano did. Dante visited the archive chamber. The pinned guard had vanished. The copper press had been removed. An industrial cleaner burned his nose. The younger guard survived with a fractured wrist and remembered Evelyn pulling him into the document lift when she could have escaped alone. He also remembered the attacker receiving Dante's authorization code. Miss Shaw asked for the second phrase. He said he didn't know it. Dante looked at the blood on the broken carriage gate. Evelyn had been injured protecting a man she had no reason to save. Personal habit. Impossible time. An ally who knew too much. 3 contradictions. Each pointing away from the easy answer he had announced to the world. On the floor beneath the press, Dante found a torn strip of red paper embossed with half a lion. He compared it with the continuity order. The shallow wing matched. When he searched old corporate records, he discovered the press had been transferred 9 years earlier to Whitecrest Records, a document storage company purchased through a shell corporation. Its silent owner was Stefano Rinaldi. Dante sat alone in Evelyn's office as the truth rearranged every memory he had defended. Stefano had not merely used her credentials. He had selected her because the Shaw name came preloaded with guilt. Dante had completed the frame when he withdrew his protection. The retired driver returned at dusk with one address, Shaw Letterpress. A boarded shop in the old garment district. Dante went without a convoy. On the way, he received notice that 3 armed teams had also entered the district. Stefano had heard enough of the search to follow. Dante checked his weapon and drove faster. Knowing Evelyn would have no reason to believe the man who found her first had come to apologize. Evelyn had turned her father's abandoned print shop into a refuge using dust, dead machinery, and habits no digital tracker could read. She brought Victor through the rear alley, removed the bullet with supplies from an emergency kit, and forced him to stay awake by making him recite every word exchanged with Stefano's buyer. Victor never saw the buyer's face. The instructions arrived through a voice filter, but payment came from Whitecrest Records. The buyer wanted the treaty destroyed, Dante isolated, and the original continuity order signed before the port audit began. You could leave, Victor said through clenched teeth. The border is 2 hours north. Evelyn tightened his bandage. And 4,000 workers lose their wages while Stefano turns the harbor into a war zone. Dante stripped your protection. My moral judgment does not belong to Dante. Headlights swept across the boarded windows. Evelyn extinguished the lamp and moved to the old press controls. Dante entered alone through the front door. Hands visible. His cart open. Evelyn aimed Victor's pistol at his chest. You have 30 seconds before I decide your apology is another trap. I was wrong. He did not soften it with, because I let evidence arranged by a man I trusted become an excuse to doubt the woman who had earned my trust every day. 25 seconds. Stefano owns Whitecrest. He controlled the copper press and the duplicate authorization device. I gave him a false signing location at the glass house. Victor laughed weakly from the back room. Then you led him here. Engines stopped in the alley. Dante drew his weapon and turned toward the rear entrance. I came in a car no one knows. Evelyn lowered her pistol just enough to listen. A faint tapping traveled through the heating pipe, 3 short knocks. Too long. Her father had used the pipes to signal neighboring printers during union raids. They did not follow you, she said. They followed Whitecrest paper. She pulled the stolen succession page from her jacket. A microscopic tracking strip had been pressed beneath the gold border. The back door burst inward. Evelyn threw the press lever. Heavy rollers thundered to life, dragging a hanging canvas across the narrow aisle and knocking the first gunman off balance. Dante disarmed him, while Evelyn released a rack of metal type that scattered under 2 more attackers' boots. She did not wait to be rescued. She crossed the moving platform, struck the emergency brake, and trapped the third man's coat between the rollers without crushing his arm. Dante covered the rear door until the retired driver brought loyal men from the adjoining roof. The fight ended in less than 2 minutes. One captured attacker carried a glasshouse floor plan, a notary credential, and instructions to recover Evelyn alive. Stefano still needed the succession page she had taken. Dante cut the tracking strip from its border and placed it inside an empty ink tin. We can send this wherever we want. Evelyn looked at him. We. If you choose. I have no right to command you. The change in his language did more than his apology, though it did not erase the ballroom. Victor emerged, pale but standing. He identified the Whitecrest payment account and produced a backup chip from the transmitter. It contained the buyer's last message once Moretti signs. Remove both secretaries from the chain. Dante frowned. Both Evelyn opened her father's old manifest. The page blamed Samuel Shaw, but its delivery notation referred to a second secretary assigned to Dante's father. That woman had disappeared after the root leak 15 years earlier. Her personnel file listed a married name Evelyn recognized from the current counsel Anna Rinaldi, Stefano's late wife. The old betrayal and the new one were connected, but the manifest alone could not prove how. Stefano's fatal limitation was now clear. He needed original Moretti documents because federal examiners could distinguish the copper press from modern seals. Every forged order required him to retrieve or destroy the authentic record. Evelyn placed the tracking strip in an envelope and wrote Glasshouse on the front. Let him believe you still intend to sign there. Dante nodded. What do you need from me? Access to Founders Hall. 3 different versions of the emergency agenda, and permission to run the operation. Granted. Permission means you can revoke it. She held his gaze. I need authority. Dante removed the black Moretti signet from his hand and set it beside her ledger. Then take mine. Evelyn did not touch the ring. Follow my plan tomorrow, even when it makes you look weak. Dante pushed the ring closer. I already know what it costs to ignore you. Outside, sirens approached the captured gunmen. Summoned through the legitimate port security unit already assigned to the federal event, Evelyn finally picked up the signet. It was not forgiveness. It was leverage. And this time Dante had surrendered it freely. They prepared the counter-trap in the print shop, because every room Dante owned might still be listening. Evelyn drew the plan on butcher paper, while a retired surgeon closed the wound in her shoulder and warned her not to lift her left arm. Dante stood across the press table and followed her instructions without replacing them with his own. First, they secured suspicion the impossible calendar timestamp, the altered hotel audio, and the unauthorized relay proved the official case against Evelyn was false. Second, they established connection. Whitecrest owned the relay hardware, the copper press, and the tracking strip. Those facts tied Stefano to the means, but not to the orders. Conviction required proof that he knowingly directed the assassination and intended to seize the harbor. Evelyn prepared 3 agendas for the final event. One said Dante would sign continuity papers in the West Archive at 10:45. That copy went only to Stefano through a sealed analog courier. A second placed the signing in the trustees' chamber and went to the 2 council members still under suspicion. The true agenda kept Dante on the main stage under federal observation. If armed men entered the West Archive, Stefano would have acted on information created after Evelyn disappeared. Information he alone possessed. Victor agreed to identify the Whitecrest payment account before the port trustees. But he wanted protection for his younger sister, who lived inside Salvi territory. Dante could have demanded obedience. Instead, he arranged lawful witness protection through the federal attorney already supervising the harbor audit. Evelyn noticed the choice. Respect, unlike attraction, changed what a powerful man was willing to surrender. Near midnight, she and Dante entered the municipal records basement beneath Founders Hall. Her father's original manifest remained bound in a shipment volume no one had opened in 15 years. Samuel's initials appeared beside the leaked route, but Evelyn held the page toward a low lamp and saw 2 sets of pressure marks. The visible destination had been typed after her father signed. Beneath it, the original carbon impression named a safe route through Pier 9. A secretary's correction symbol in the margin pointed to a missing amendment. Evelyn recognized the mark from old office lessons her father had taught her. Anna Rinaldi had created the amendment, but a witness line below it bore Stefano's distinctive backward R. He had authorized the fatal route and later removed the amendment, leaving Samuel's signature attached to the substituted page. Dante stared at the proof his family had failed to seek. My father destroyed yours with this. Your father accepted the easiest answer, and I repeated him. Evelyn closed the volume. Then do something different when it costs you. An alarm sounded upstairs. The courier assigned to Stefano had been found unconscious, and the sealed West Archive agenda was gone. Their false information had reached its target. But someone had moved sooner than planned. Dante offered Evelyn his armored vest. She refused it and took a light protective panel that allowed her to move. No improvising. She told him, no private sacrifice. If one of us loses contact, the other continues the public signing. Dante fastened his signet around her neck on its chain because her injured hand could not wear it. And if the danger reaches you, you follow the plan. The answer cost him visible effort. I follow the plan. for the first time in 7 years. Dante Moretti gave Evelyn Shaw a promise built on obedience to her judgment rather than confidence in his power. They separated at the basement stairs. Neither saw Stefano watching the corridor monitor, with Anna Rinaldi's missing amendment in his hand. Founders Hall opened at 9 beneath federal cameras, harbor banners, and the eyes of both families. Dock workers filled the rear gallery because the treaty would determine whether their jobs survived the week. Dante entered from the east with no secretary beside him. Stefano walked at his right shoulder, wearing the solemn expression of a man prepared to inherit a burden. Evelyn entered through the Public Records Office under a temporary audit credential and took a seat behind the federal counsel. The room reacted when people recognized her. Whispers carried the words traitor, secretary, and Samuel Shaw's daughter. Dante reached the microphone. Evelyn Shaw remains separated from Moretti operations until today's evidence is heard. The statement sounded like rejection. Evelyn had written it herself. Stefano needed to believe Dante still valued the council's judgment over hers. The treaty clerk began reading the legitimate shipping provisions. At 10:30, Victor failed to arrive. His protective vehicle had been found empty beneath an overpass. Its driver, unconscious. At 10:40, the West Archive camera went dark. Evelyn sent the agreed signal to Dante, one tap against the brass rail. Continue. Stefano approached the stage carrying the red continuity folder. We cannot ask the harbor to trust a leader whose roots and credentials remain compromised, he announced, for the safety of every person here. Dante should transfer temporary authority before signing the treaty. The Valenti delegation murmured agreement. A federal trustee told Dante the continuity decision belonged to his company and would not delay the port vote. Stefano opened the folder to the signature page. Dante looked toward Evelyn. She gave no sign of their alliance. He picked up the pen. Before its point touched paper, 2 port officers entered with Victor between them. Hope rose in Evelyn, then died when she saw his bruised face and rigid posture. Evelyn Shaw hired me to purchase Dante's route. Victor said. She promised me the harbor after Moretti's death. Stefano had reached his sister. Victor was protecting her with a lie. The gallery erupted. Stefano turned to Evelyn with perfect disappointment. Even her chosen partner has confessed. Federal security moved toward her. Dante's pen remained above the order. Evelyn could expose the trap early. But without Victor or the team assigned to the West Archive, Stefano could dismiss Whitecrest as an ordinary vendor. She let the officers take her arms. Do not sign that page, she said, allowing fear to enter her voice because Stefano expected to hear it. Dante's expression turned cold. You no longer advise me. He signed. Stefano exhaled and pressed his thumb beside Dante's name, accepting temporary authority. Then he ordered the officers to remove Evelyn through the West Archive instead of the public exit. That deviation was the choice she needed. The officers were not federal security. Their badges carried the old port crest, retired 3 years earlier. Evelyn stumbled deliberately at the archive door and struck her signet against the metal frame, sending the impact signal to Dante's clean phone. The false officers dragged her inside. Whitecrest men were already tearing open cabinets, searching for Samuel's manifest and the succession page she had stolen. One held the tracked envelope sent only to Stefano. Another poured solvent across the paper shelves. They bound Evelyn to a chair, took Dante's signet from her neck, and set the first stack alight. On stage, Stefano lifted the signed order before the council. By Dante Moretti's authority, I am suspending this treaty. The harbor trustee reached for the emergency freeze notice. Behind him, Dante calmly removed the pen from Stefano's hand. "Read the verb above my signature." Stefano looked down. The order did not transfer authority. Evelyn had replaced authorize with acknowledge in the master template. Dante had acknowledged receipt of Stefano's request and transferred nothing. Stefano's apparent victory lasted 3 seconds. Then fire alarms filled Founders Hall, and the West Archive disappeared behind steel emergency doors, with Evelyn still trapped inside. Smoke reached Evelyn before the flames. She pressed both feet against the archive table and rocked the chair toward a floor vent. Using the metal edge to saw through the binding around her right wrist, her wounded shoulder burned with each movement. But she did not pull against it. The Whitecrest men had left to seal the corridor. Confident the fire would destroy her and every original record, they had overlooked the document conveyor built into the oldest cabinets. Evelyn freed one hand, opened the narrow hatch, and fed Samuel's bound shipment volume into the fireproof transfer box. Then she crawled after it. The passage was barely wider than her shoulders. Heat chased her until the conveyor dropped her behind the trustee's chamber. Coughing, but alive. On the main stage, Dante refused to let Stefano cancel the signing. "You have no authority," he said. Stefano smiled toward the crowd. "I have your signature. A confession from Victor. And the only woman accusing me running from a burning archive. She is not running." Evelyn stepped through the chamber doors carrying her father's volume. Her suit was streaked with ash, and one wrist still wore a strip of binding. The room fell silent. She placed the tracked West Archive agenda beneath the federal document camera. This schedule was created yesterday and delivered only to Stefano Rinaldi. The men who abducted me carried it while searching for an original record he needed destroyed. Port security brought in the 2 false officers and 3 Whitecrest attackers captured when Dante's loyal team sealed the outer corridor. Their equipment carried Whitecrest serial numbers. Stefano did not retreat. Miss Shaw possessed Dante's signet. She could have issued every order herself. It was a credible answer, and Evelyn had expected it. She opened Samuel's volume and displayed the pressure marks beneath the old manifest. A federal examiner confirmed that the fatal destination had been added after Samuel's signature. The missing amendment carried Stefano's backward R. But he attacked that too. My wife handled those records. Evelyn has spent years learning our archives. She could imitate an initial. Victor stepped away from the port officers holding him. She could not create the payment I received 15 years ago. He had lied to protect his sister only until Dante's witness team extracted her from Salvi territory. Victor supplied the trustees with the Whitecrest account history. The same numbered account that paid for the current relay had paid Anna Rinaldi days before the old route leak. Evelyn gave the final controlled fact. At 8 this morning. Dante told you the original amendment was inside the West Archive. It was not. Only this audience and your abductors heard that location. Your men entered before the archive camera failed. The federal trustee displayed access logs from an independent municipal system Stefano could not alter. His credential had opened the service door, and his call had activated the obsolete security badges. Means. Anton. And action now stood on separate records. Stefano's composure finally broke. He drew a compact pistol from the red folder and aimed at Evelyn. Dante moved, but she shouted, "Follow the plan." He stopped and struck the stage alarm instead. Steel partitions rose between the gallery and the dais. Protecting the workers, Evelyn kicked the wheeled document camera into Stefano's knees and dropped behind the stone lectern. Port officers closed from both sides. Stefano fired once into the ceiling, then reached for a remote switch. Outside, a cargo crane began moving a suspended container toward the glass wall. It was his contingency: destroy Founders Hall and blame the damaged control network. Evelyn knew the event schedule had placed a manual harbor engineer in the East booth during every signing. She grabbed the stage radio. East booth. Cut crane 4 at the mechanical brake. The crane stopped with the container hanging yards from the building. Stefano stared toward the window. Defeated, not by luck, but by a staffing detail he had dismissed as secretarial work, Dante disarmed him, then stepped away, so federal marshals assigned to the port audit could make the arrest under lawful authority. Before the cameras in both families, Dante returned to the microphone. Evelyn Shaw did not betray this house. She exposed the man who did. I withdrew her protection, repeated the injustice done to her father, and placed her life in greater danger. Those decisions were mine. He turned toward her without asking forgiveness. The record will carry the truth in the same room that carried the accusation. Evelyn placed Samuel's corrected manifest beside the treaty. Dante and the Valenti leader signed before midnight. The harbor remained open. Stefano Rinaldi's empire collapsed through records Evelyn had taught everyone else to ignore. Whitecrest accounts connected him to the relay, the hired attackers, the Salvi lease bid, and the murder of the technology specialist. The independent harbor audit uncovered 15 years of diverted payments. Anna Rinaldi had helped alter the original manifest under coercion, then preserved the hidden amendment before her death. Samuel Shaw's name was formally cleared by the Moretti Council, the Port Authority, and the court that had accepted the false accusation. Dante did not bury the correction inside a private apology. He called the same captains, delegates, trustees, and reporters who had heard him strip Evelyn's protection, standing in Founders Hall. He read a resolution naming Samuel as the employee who had tried to preserve the safe route and Evelyn as the strategist who saved the treaty. Then he removed every policy that allowed one council member to control emergency credentials. The Moretti signet would never again outweigh 2 independent confirmations. Evelyn listened from the front row, no longer standing behind Dante's chair. Afterward, he met her in the restored print shop. He brought no guards and carried no flowers large enough to disguise a request. "I owe you more than a position," he said. "You owe me accurate systems." Those two. He offered her a charter creating an independent Office of Treaty Integrity with its own budget, staff, and power to block any Moretti or Valenti action that violated the harbor agreement. The position reported to the federal trustees, not to Dante. It also granted her a partnership share in the legitimate shipping company, earned through the security framework she had created. "You would not be my secretary," he said. "You would be able to tell me no in writing, in public, and with legal force." Evelyn read every clause. "And if I refuse, the charter remains. You choose its director." That answer mattered most. "I accept for 1 year," she said. "My office stays here. My father's name goes above the door." Dante agreed without negotiation. Trust returned slowly, through meetings where he waited for her conclusion. Routes he allowed her team to challenge, and quiet evenings when neither of them used work as a shield. He never asked her to forget the ballroom. She never allowed his guilt to become another task she had to manage. 3 months later, they attended the first harbor workers' benefit under the new treaty. Evelyn wore a dark red dress and stood among people who now approached her for decisions instead of access to Dante. Victor, recovered and preparing to testify, raised a glass from across the room. Evelyn smiled at him. The old words rose between her and Dante. But this time, he did not issue a warning. "You know," she said, "the last time I smiled at another man, you locked an entire ballroom. You were signaling an assassination. Everyone thought you were jealous." Dante considered the crowd. Then here, I was terrified. Not jealous. I had just realized the one person who could read the danger was standing inside it. Evelyn's expression softened, and now he held out his hand but did not touch her until she placed hers in it. "Now, I know protecting you does not mean controlling where you stand." They crossed the floor as equals. At the center of the room, Evelyn looked back at Victor, then deliberately smiled at Dante. "Should I stop?" she asked. Dante's answer was quiet enough to belong only to them. "Never stop smiling at me." She chose to kiss him. Not because he had finally claimed her, but because he had learned to release every claim. Beyond the windows, the harbor cranes moved on schedule. The workers remained employed, and Samuel Shaw's restored name shone in gold above the print shop door.